We all love the Bathurst 12 hour. It's one of our favourite events of the year and we eagerly wait it to come around each February. It was a glorious time in the early 2000s when we had 2 Bathurst 12 hours back to back and then it was known as the Bathurst 24 hour. And today we're going to dive into it and I can't wait.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Hello and welcome to the Motor Racing Passion Podcast. I'm Luke Blattman and today we're going to be talking about the 2 magical years of the Bathurst 24 hour in 2002 and 2003. 2 fantastic motor races, ultimately dominated by Holden Monaros, but 2 great years in Australian motor racing history. Here with me today to talk about our memories of the race are 3 people who were there on the spectator hills when it happened. I've got my 2 brothers, Adam and Daniel, and I've also got Brock, my friend, with me. Now, I'll go to you first, Adam. When the Bathurst 24 hour comes up, what are your first memories of it?
Well, for me, for 2 aspects, was being in my early teens at that stage, was falling asleep on the front straight at like 2-3 a.m. and be woken up by in 2003 in that case, getting woken up by the fluoro green Kawasaki Porsche. That thing was just absolutely savage on the eardrums for it. But yeah, when it comes around, it's the twice around the clock race for it, and it was just a great time in Australian motorsport. And just glad I was able to be there for the 2 years.
How about you, Brock?
Mate, there's just no words. I was 12, 13, went to both of them with my dad. 24 hours around Bathurst, supercar drivers, international drivers, different cars we'd never seen before, an unfortunately loud Porsche that Adam referenced, but just awesome.
We'd play a grab of it on the podcast, but I think it'll deafen everyone listening.
Just an awesome event, Lukey. I'm super excited about this podcast.
What about you, Daniel?
So many memories, but pulling one out, it was the 2003 race and 2 of the biggest downpours that I've ever experienced at Bathurst. So it was, the second one came, I think it was midnight, 1 o'clock.
It was.
But just being huddled in behind the pits, which they're not the same pits now. So there was
the classic pits.
Yeah, it was just absolutely getting pelted, trying to like huddle and hide from the incoming rain. And then it was the ensuing flood that made its way down the pit lane. So that was, and I think it took till probably lunchtime the next day to thaw out. But, it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I remember that first downpour of the 2003 race. I remember huddling under the entry to, I think it was the first aid office, or a little office down near just under what was the James Hardy Centre. It's now not there anymore. But it just pelting rain and everyone just ducking for every little bit of cover they could get.
And stop the race. It was a red flag. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought your favourite memory of the race might have been talking to Alan Simonson, Adam.
My brief 10-second chat with him right there. I think he just finished a stint. I think it was around midnight, somewhere there. It was definitely dark when it happened, and he was walking back to the transporter and just said, "Alan, great job." And I think it was hello, and I was like, "Great job," and it was like, "Very nice, thank you." And he kept on walking and that, and that's my claim to fame for the late Alan Simonson, top bloke.
Where did you watch the start of the race from when you were there, Brock?
Mate, I have a photo. I was actually looking at it last week and we were right on the start line, in line with the 427 Monaro in 02.
Yep.
And 03, I think we watched it from the chase from memory. But awesome weekend. I can't say it enough.
I remember heading into that race in 2002, just the anticipation of what we're going to see. And then being like, I remember, was it a Saturday night, sitting on the hill just going, we've still got 19 hours left. How good is this? But then going, those 19 hours disappeared. And I was like Sunday afternoon just going, oh, where did it all go? So
It's like with the 12 hour now, when it gets 6 hours in, like the first 6 hours fly, I find at the 12 hour. And all of a sudden it's like, well, there's only half the race still to go.
Yeah.
I remember the first 6 hours of the 24 hour went past quite quick, especially the second year, the 2003 one, because they started the race a bit earlier. So by the time the sun went down, it was probably 8 o'clock, so 7:30, 8 o'clock. But you still had the whole night to go. You still had the whole next day.
because it was 3 p.m. start, didn't it? Moved from 4 p.m. start to 3 p.m.
2002 was a 4 p.m. start. 03 was a 2 p.m. start.
Oh, they went 2 hours.
Because I think with the Channel 7 coverage, they wanted to get – because it clashed with the Rugby World Cup final.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I
Because they
think-
played that on the big screen. Yeah.
Do you remember who won that Rugby World Cup final?
Yes.
You're supposed to say no.
Sorry, no.
Luke doesn't remember. Do you remember who won the Bathurst
Oh,
24
no.
hour?
I do.
Well,
I do.
case closed.
Yeah,
We know which
exactly.
event should have taken
That's
priority.
why there was no need to put the Rugby World Cup
Exactly.
on the TV there. I think they obviously played that because they thought, oh, maybe if we put it on TV at the track,
Some extras will come.
people might come along to see both.
I think
People might have stayed. They must have thought people would have stayed home to watch the Union on TV.
Can you think, aside from a touring car or a supercar, I can't think of a more iconic Australian motor racing vehicle than the yellow Monaro.
Ooh.
That wasn't involved in the Bathurst 1000.
Yeah.
Controversial.
Possibly.
well, the Australian car in there, like there wasn't a modern day, version of like the Falcon coupes
Like-
that could come out. Like when you think Monaro, like we've got some great Monaros like Norm Beachy, everything like that. But to the modern day, you instantly go,
Everyone recognises that car.
You're right. Well,
Just Car Insurance, like what a plug. I still remember Just Car
Yeah.
Insurance because of that car.
is it still around?
I don't know, but if they were, like I know who they are
Yeah.
because of 2002 Bathurst
It's a fair point. If you
24 hour.
think Group C touring cars, the first thing that pops in your mind is probably Peter Brock's, if you're a Holden man especially, Brock's 84 Dayglow Marlboro Commodore. And it's, if you think Nations Cup in general, you think the Monaro and the 24 hour as well. That is ultimately the first thing that you'd probably think of is a yellow Monaro.
Not in the, I guess, Australian landscape, as you're saying with Monaro, but I think the other big part of the 2002 24 hour was the introduction to Australia of Moslers.
and Martin Short.
And the great Martin Short, Roll Center Racing. But I think in terms of that point, no one in
heard of
Australia, had really known what a Mosler was. I remember John Bow on the coverage even saying that even he didn't know what a Mosler was. And obviously he rates himself pretty highly in most things. But, and just seeing that car that, I was captivated by it.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously it had two very good runs, I think a second and a fifth from memory. And, so I think that, and then that car obviously then filtered on into future Australian GT championships. Adam, you've worked on one, and it kind of gave you some of the most satisfying experiences of your life, I'm sure.
Well,
Satisfying moments. They were satisfied when they fixed it.
until we retired from the race and for it there, and that was the last time it drove in Australia for that. But for that, and then I guess in 2003, going off the introduction of the Mosler was the Morgan Aero 8. Like that was just another car. Like I didn't realise anyone raced a Morgan up until
I
that.
remember
so-
Morgan's. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I was almost in tears when that thing blew a motor at, I think it was like 8 o'clock that night. 5 hours in, and
It caught fire right in front of us.
Yeah.
And then because they parked it just out of Hell Corner.
Yeah.
I was just more intrigued by how they incorporated the wood into the chassis of the car. Like that.
Was it real wood?
It was hardwood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
that
that-
is very British.
Yeah, and that was the thing about it, that it was that, like when you think about race cars and everything like that, to that formula before it, they're like purpose-built cars to it. And being, a young teenager for myself, that twigged my interest a little bit, something different. And when after the race, went back and had a look at it and was like, yeah, wow, they really did integrate wood into the chassis, into it there. And it was just, yeah,
because
cool.
that was a Class 2 car, wasn't it? That was up against the Challenge Ferrari,
it was,
the BMW Z4s and different things like that.
Yeah, it was in sort of I suppose Class B.
Yeah,
you'd say, but it was funny when during 2002 when they started announcing the overseas entries. I mean, you saw a photo of the Mosler, and your first thought was, I mean, that's going to win. That's a sports car. That's going to win everything. And I mean, there was. I don't think anyone really expected the Monaro to do what it was going to do. Initially, when the initial announcement.
Oh yeah,
and you saw a photo of a Mosler is going to come over and race. I think probably the initial fear was the Mosler was going to give everyone a lesson.
But then when you think, obviously, once some of the noises came around about what some of the what would you say concessions that were being given to the Monaro, and then another concession, and then I think the Team Lamborghini Australia were pretty vocal. Prancing Horse Racing were pretty vocal. I think that kind of pricked your ears up to think that this Monaro wasn't going to be particularly stock and could create a surprise. I think the surprise when it came from was just how reliable it was. Like, I think everyone thought it'd be fast,
It
but
didn't
would it
get
last?
pushed once. Like,
No.
even in qualifying, they were just absolutely tooting around.
Yeah, I remember the opening stint of the 2002 race as well. And as you know, when you're a bit younger, we pretty much watched the start, watched a couple of laps, and headed straight to the pits. So we're in the pits for the Monaro's first stop, which let's say was after an hour, give or take. It had blown a tyre in that point too. We were behind the pits, and Garth Tander jumps out and obviously walks over to Stephen Richards and Nathan Pretty, and they were like, "Oh, how was it?" And we heard him say, "Oh, that was easy." And obviously, little do we know at that point how easy it would be. But yeah, as you
In
said,
the first year at least.
yeah, 2002 wasn't pushed, first stint, and that's when they had, I think, the 360 Ferrari absolutely screaming its head off, trying to stay with it. And then for him to jump out and say it was easy, I was like, that was pretty telling.
Yeah, well, I remember the Ferrari was on pole, the Prancing Horse Ferrari in 2002. But then then the Monaro took the lead up Mountain Straight.
What sort of lap times were they doing back then, Lukey?
Well, the Prancing Horse Ferrari got pole with 2 minute 15.
That's interesting because even like in the early 90s, the GTRs were doing very similar pace to that.
Yeah.
I would have thought they would have been slightly quicker than
Yeah, I suppose they may have had them in because there wasn't a lot of practice time for the 2002 race. So they may have just, I suppose, had them in 24-hour trim. But, I mean, in qualifying, the Monaro was nearly 2 seconds slower.
Yeah, they went faster than that.
Well, I remember, was it McConville did a 2:13 in the morning warm-up?
Yep, and then he went faster, and then Tanner went faster than that during that opening stint. So I don't get the feeling that 2:16's too indicative of the potential of the
But
car.
I remember that first stint of the 02 race, and the Ferrari gave chase to the Monaro, but probably did some because it wasn't long. Because I remember the TV coverage showed the first hour, wasn't it?
Yep.
And it was pretty much just after that first hour. That's when the Monaro got the puncture, and I mean the Ferrari was out not long after.
Yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 laps, and it had to crawl around the whole track. Launch the engine.
I guess one of the greatest things about the 24-hour in that point of view was, we got the great cars at the front, but it was just a diverse range of cars from the front of the field to the back. Like, we've got the exotic cars at the front, but then you had 2002 that would have had Future Tourers at the time in it.
Mitsubishi Magna or
The
Future
Magna.
Tourer.
And this is to add to that, Adam, Mitsubishi Magna P9 in qualifying. How good is that?
I think that's the fastest a Magna's been around Bathurst ever.
228.
Yep.
But
I remember that Magna we saw. Well, that originated in the 2000-2001 Australian Super Touring Championship as a future tourer.
Yep.
But I guess even from that, like one of the oddest, not oddest, but I guess from an outside view would be you got a Ferrari, a Holden Monaro, Porsche, everything like that. in the same race as a Mitsubishi Mirage Cyborg from the old Mirage Cup days that was going around. Like it was just those two extremes that kind of threw it back to the class racing at Bathurst back in the day in the 12 hour in the early 90s.
Well,
in that run.
You had the Osborne MR2s.
That's right.
That dated back to the model anyway. I don't know the specific cars, but the model anyway dated back to the 12 hour.
Yeah, it was just like I guess looking back on it now, it's kind of like that was our version. You could align it with VLN at the Nordschleifer.
Yeah.
With it there, you got the big diverse parts of cars, and it was just cool. Like they've done some respect to the 12 hour now, but try to make it more sports or GT3 more orientated. But yeah, it was just cool to see. You got the Monaro buzzing around, the Mosler for that. You get the Future Tours,
Super Tours. There are a couple of BMWs. Yeah.
That we had. Was it 2003? We had SAE.
The
Searles, and they had Darryl O'Young came out and drove it.
Oh, did he really?
Darryl O'Young? No, Alex
Young.
Sorry, Alex Young.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. And yeah, they had a troubled year that year, but for it there. But yeah, it was just cool, diverse range of cars.
I think with Ross Palmer's intention of the race, I think it was very much Nürburgring 24-hour based. That was sort of his vision for it, to be sort of the Australian version of the N24. At the time, I mean, the Nürburgring 24's changed a little bit from an outright perspective in that it's GT3 sort of is the outright class at the Nürburgring now. But at the time, there were a lot of specials running at the front in the Nürburgring 24, and maybe that was his inspiration in a way for the spec that the Monaro was allowed to run in. Do we think did the Monaro make the race, or ultimately did the Monaro kill the race off?
There was a Holden used a promotional line at the time, Monaro Game Over. There was a TV ad that ran with it, and unfortunately, yes, the Monaro was game over for the Bathurst 24-hour. I think it made it in such a short period of time. But I think if the race was allowed to kind of just build and evolve, almost a bit like the 12-hour has done past, it built small, slowly grew within its means. But I feel like the introduction of Holden, and obviously once Holden ran, trying to cater to Holden and give them for their investment, the thing went from 0 to 100 and then broke. So I think if we had a bit more of a steady evolution, we may have seen the event last longer.
Was it almost 10 years too early, do you think? Like, if you look at, I guess hindsight's an easy thing to look at, and especially in this, we've looked at the 12-hour and its growth and everything like that. If the 24-hour, say, was pitched and run in, say, 2012, 2013, say it started from there 10 years later.
I don't know what that would give you, though. Like, cause
the only difference, there would have been no Tony Cochrane to be up against.
That's true. He was getting the supercars juggernaut running at that time.
Yeah, and he was a very, very combative with other events.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was threatening when Palmer announced it at Adelaide in 2002. That's another thing to factor in, that from the race's announcement to it being run was 8 or 9 months, which is, in hindsight, pretty short period of time to put a race together.
And did Ross Palmer, when he created the race, did he want it to be... Did he envision it being a slow build, or did he want an impact straight away?
Great question.
Because 2002, they'd started running their own, Procar had started running their own events as well.
But I think what he might have done is he probably didn't think that kind of instant impact was possible. But then obviously when Holden jumped on board, and then I guess then it was a little bit, not out of his control, but do you know what I mean? Obviously then he was trying to please Holden and... keep them engaged in it.
Because the Nations Cup rules sort of evolved with the Monaro as well.
Yeah.
Before the Monaro, in 2002, it was the rules for Nations Cup were kind of cup car based in a way.
But if you look at 2001, though, I think Nations Cup as a category, and this might be to Adam's point too, there was some relatively unstable rules. But you think from 2001 to 2002, the Cup car got introduced because the Porsche competitors were saying the
Lamborghini was
Lamborghinis,
too-
the Vipers, the Ferraris were too fast, so then they gave them that concession. And then obviously then Ferrari wanted another concession, and it just kind of just built and fell out of
Kind
that.
of mirrored Group C back in the day. One manufacturer would, I want this, I'm this, and then concessions were given. So
That's every motor racing category in history.
I don't think the event happens the way it did without the Monaro. Like I think without the Monaro, I don't think you get the. I mean, the event could have paid for the TV.
It did pay for
It
the
did
TV.
pay for the TV, but do you, without the Monaro, I suppose you still buy the TV time, but there's not the
media interest.
yeah
in
it's not the
Australia.
media interest without
It
the Monaro.
needed the Monaro, and it needed the factory Holden drivers there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that the Monaro, maybe killed the competition of the event, but
Yeah.
certainly
because
made the event what
if you look
it
at the Nations Cup front runners at the time, they weren't factory teams.
No.
Like I think if Holden had run a Monaro built say to NGT rules of the time, or in the spirit of what the other Nations Cup cars were, I think there'd probably be the same result. Maybe not lap time wise, but I mean that they were a factory backed team, eight professional drivers in 2003.
Look, they had the best driver lineup. They had, the most experienced team and engineers at Bathurst. They had, probably the best engine shop available to them.
Yeah.
And they had experience in like the Bathurst 1000, Gary Rogers Motorsport. They had runs on the board around reliability.
But I think that it was the means in which they won too. Like if they win both races, but they win them by a lap or a lap
Domination.
and a half, no issue. But the
Yeah,
the 2003 race when they just rolled around 1-2 for 24 hours, like I think that's.
I mean, if you're a Holden fan, it was pretty enjoyable at the time.
Yeah,
Especially as a young boy, I loved it.
but as a young boy, did you like were you watching that? Did you have an appreciation that maybe they were given a leg up?
No, I had my Tanda hat on, and life was great. And
Okay.
you?
Yeah. No, I just remember, so it was David Addison, the commentator at 2003 race on the PA, and he's rolled out with leading class 1A, 2 Monaros, and leading class 1B.
Actually, that brings up a good little point, in as much as the mention of the PA system, the 2002 Bathurst 24-hour. It's live streaming. I suppose it was available in 2002 in a way. I mean, you couldn't have watched it on our 56K dial-up internet, but
I don't think it was an option for most people.
but was the streaming of it available?
Oh, I'm sure. I think it was broadcast internationally. I think on probably other networks.
Can you think
but
of? Can you think of a? I don't think streaming wasn't
Not
really.
even
No, it wasn't
available
really.
to-
Because remember, Le Mans 24 hour, I used to log on to Radio
Radio
Le
Le
Mans
Mans.
website and get an
Yeah.
audio feed.
Yeah,
That would have been the extent
I did that
of what you could
2000.
do.
I remember doing that the 2001 Le Mans 24 hours.
yeah, I think that was probably the extent back then because I
Yeah.
don't think streaming and everything would have
Yeah,
been.
that's a pity because David Addison, it was on the Channel 7 telecast, but on the non-telecast periods, he went and joined the PA for around the track, and some of his insight and just his stories were fantastic. And I remember that bit when he mentioned about Class 1A for two-door V8 supercars. There was other bits of banter.
Two-door
where-
V8
Yeah, it was spot on.
There was other bits where they said one of the other guys in the PA booth was said that the Monaro is winning the race, and then David Addison comes, the Monaro's not winning the race; he's leading the race. And bits of banter. It sounded like a TV coverage. It would have been great. It's a pity there wasn't you can't go back now and match the footage up with the
Audio.
with the audio of the race, because he said he had so many stories. Even he was telling stories about the European Touring Car Championship from the 80s, stories about when Brock and Grice and Alan Moffat and that went over there, and
I think
he told stories about Le Mans, and I think Aaron Noonan was part of the PA commentary that weekend, and they'd both been at Le Mans that year, so they were just talking about Le Mans, and
But I think
it was great to listen to.
I think that's a bit of the the great thing about a 24-hour race is you've got 24 hours to talk about the race that's unfolding in front of you, but there's so much of an opportunity to talk about so many linkages into the race. And, it was focused around Australia and Australians going around and having a person the caliber of David Addison coming out to commentate and his knowledge and everything, being able to, talk about that for a 24-hour period for their spread.
And then we had
across it.
Andrew Marriott in 2003 as well.
Was very good, yeah.
So I think, and that just bodes well to any long distance race in there, that there's two stories, I guess. There's the story of the race unfolding, and then I guess it's the journey that the commentary team take you through the race, telling you what's happening, but also having that conversation, that banter in between it. And that's just, that's fantastic.
I think the TV coverage of it, in a way, ultimately the race, the way they promoted it, it was the first 24 hour just became a rival to the 1000. Just the way it was always dating back to the Super Touring 1000s, like it was Super Touring 1000 versus the V8 1000, just the way V8 supercars went about their business. And the 24 hour became a rival. And so everything went up alongside each other. And with the TV coverage, AVE did a great job, but it seemed like Speed Week on Channel 7. Like the budget wasn't there for the quality of the telecast compared to...
Did it need it though?
I think if you're on Channel 7 and the race is being built up as...
I think we're spoiled,
the direct comparisons are going to be there in the quality of the broadcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, but now, if you compare now to back then, we're spoiled for what we get on the coverage. If you look back to 2002, that was still sort of comparative to almost what Channel 10 was spitting out with the V8. Like, it was probably a bit more fine-tuned and polished, but you still had people
you could tell the
race.
budgets weren't the same.
But they didn't need to be.
They probably did.
Yeah, but think about the Le Mans coverage at 2 a.m. It's atrocious. And that's Le Mans.
Oh, yeah.
Onboard car sounds.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic.
I think the coverage was fine for the era.
Oh, it was fine, but I just think if you're having a direct comparison and the races were built up as rival races.
I think who was building it? Because, I can't imagine Procar as the promoter at the event were promoting it as being an equal.
No.
But that's what I mean. So if other people were doing that, but from Procar's point of view, I can totally understand them not throwing millions of dollars at the TV production. Especially when, I agree, what they put out was fine. It might not have been graphics might not have been as neat and tidy as...
but even the little things like there was a problem with the PA when they did the national anthem, little things like that coming through on the coverage.
But I think if you look at the infrastructure at Bathurst back in 2002 compared to when they did the reverb at the pits and everything like that, I think that probably played into it.
But I mean more just the way it evolved in the lead up to the race. You had just the perception, the general perception would be this isn't as polished as that.
It's funny because I was obviously at a different age group to you three when the event came around, but I went with my dad. I never saw it as a rival to supercars at all. It was like this completely separate thing that was super cool and a bit like the 12-hour now.
Yeah.
They had that whole thing in 2015 where they put the supercar test day on and it shouldn't be that way. They're two separate things. They can both grow off each other.
Oh, definitely. And it dates back to the Super Touring 1000s.
Yeah, so
they could have coexisted, but over the years, there was one side that turned everything into... even when Procar went and did its own thing with their own events in 2002, I remember comments being made from supercars in the way that, I suppose they had to find more support categories then to fill out their race meetings. But there was a combative element to that too, from memory.
Yeah, well, I think it was at the Adelaide 500 that year that they were paranoid about Procar filming any events beyond their own, and they were going and confronting cameramen and just doing stuff. And
lovely.
Exactly. Which you think too, and I'm definitely not what you'd call a supporter of V8 supercars. But yeah, you just think for
Virgin Australia supercars, Daniel.
yeah,
Is it still Virgin?
I don't know.
they've got a new buyer. So
Chinese-owned Virgin Australia supercars.
but I just think as a category like that can do so much for motorsport in the country, which seems like doesn't have a responsibility to promote other sport, other forms of motorsport, but surely has a responsibility not to undermine other categories of motorsport. And unfortunately, this is one of many examples where that's happened.
And I think Ross Palmer wanted to push pro car to the point where, for the pro car series for it there, I think he had visions of taking that up to supercars for there, but I don't think the Bathurst 24-hour in itself was ever meant to be a direct competitor to the 1000 for there. It was just like a marquee showcased event. So,
Do you think you look at how successful the 12 hours been in a February time slot, which is I never would have picked that as being the best time for it, but the way the international calendar works out, it's found its sweet spot. Do you reckon the 24-hour, if it was held at another point in the year, would have been more or less successful? Like, I don't know how they came about, November.
Maybe the week before October.
Yeah.
Yeah, a long weekend.
I think like you go back 2000, 2003 for it and you look at calendars for most championships back then, I don't think a lot of championships ran into the November, December time space where they do these days. It was, most series started late March, April, ran through to your October-ish around the world for it there. So I think it was kind of just outside of that bubble to see if they could gain some international teams in, whereas now, a lot of series are running longer. So in respect to the 12 hour has gone to that early February time slot, so it can get before the European season takes off and for that. So I think at that time it was in a perfect spot for it there. But I guess, everyone heard about Australia and Bathurst and the iconic thing, but I guess from it they probably didn't have the reach to send cars out as much as they did for it there. So
I remember talk. Was it after? It might have been after the O2 race, the first running. They were suggesting a New Year's Eve, New Year's Day time slot for the O3 race.
What
So that
a
would've been
way to
cool.
start your year.
That'd be
How
perfect.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be
And
hot.
fireworks at midnight. That would have been epic.
Like, you think how hot we are in February for the 12 hour. But
Yeah, I remember suggestions about that, but then they ultimately came back to earlier in the year for the O3 race. I think the time of year was probably all right.
Yeah, I don't think it made or break it.
Yeah.
I was just looking back at it going, I wonder if
knowing
there
what
was...
we know now.
Yeah.
It certainly didn't capture international teams' attention like the 12-hour has. I mean, there was a decent increase in international and high-quality entries from O2 to O3. But they just didn't bring the teams over, did it?
Part of what hurt the O3 race was the ACO announced during O3 they were going to start up the Le Mans Endurance Series, and they did sort of fundamentally a test race in 2003 on the Bugatti circuit at Le Mans, and it was the same weekend as the Bathurst 24-hour. So, for instance, Sequel Motorsport brought their Porsche out for O2, but O3 they ran that Le Mans Endurance Series race. So that, but I mean,
So Certec ended up running that car, though.
did they?
Yeah. So that... sorry, I take that back. It's the AD Holdings, the Floyd
Kawasaki.
car. That became... So it was a yellow car in 2002, the yellow Porsche. That became the second Certec green car in 2003.
There has to be a segment on that Porsche.
Yeah.
Like, just quickly.
Just because it's yellow.
Daniel, what are your memories of the green?
Oh, the green Porsche.
The green
Just
Kawasaki
savage
Porsche
noise.
2003.
More just wherever you were on the track.
On Earth.
You knew where it was. Like, do you know what I mean? I was like sheltering under a tin roof to avoid the train. I could hear that car.
Yeah.
Trying to like fall asleep on the hill in the morning, and you can hear it at Forest Elbow. that was
So there are rumours there was an FA18 flyover that no one heard.
But I guess
Spe-
secondly to that Porsche, it was it 02 or 03 when the Mosler had holes all through his exhaust, and it's had that off throttle, that horrendous crackle under it. Like between them two, in the middle of the night, like it was just great sounds. And then you had the throaty Monaro coming through. Like I think Tander, Pretty, was it Todd Kelly and
In the yellow one?
in the yellow one?
No, it was Richards.
Stephen
Yeah,
Richards.
Richards.
Yeah, I think when they were in the motorhome sleeping at night, they were hearing that going past. And I think when Nathan Pretty had to dig it out in 02 for it there, one of them woke up because they didn't hear the car come past every two minutes 20 seconds for it there. So it just shows, at that time as well, how loud the Monaro was with its 7-litre. Like, yeah.
Okay, well that's some of our thoughts on the Bathurst 24 hour. We're going to take a quick break and come back afterwards, and we'll reminisce some more about that magical event. Welcome back to the podcast. Now, just before we went to the break, there was some very, very good, very reminiscent memories made of the green Porsche, the Peter Floyd Porsche. That was run by Surtec Motorsport in that race, but it was a locally owned car during that 2003 season. Now, Daniel, you had a bit to do with that car during the 2003 year.
almost. I had a bit to do with the sister car, the 24 car that was blue.
Sorry, I meant to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so no, I got to know former Super Tourer driver in Australia, Peter Hills. Got to know him, and he invited me down. I was in year 12, so once I finished my HSC, I had some spare time on my days. He invited me down to his workshop down near the city, and so got to work on that car for a couple of days in the build up to the 24 hour. So being non-mechanically gifted, I was given a bit of the lucky jobs. They'd broke off one of their tools and it had actually gone inside the back of the roll cage, and Peter, not being the most nimble of fellas, I rocked in that morning and he's like, "Oh, I got a job for you." So I just basically was a gymnast rolling myself around the roll bars of the back of a RS Porsche, trying to find a snapped off bit of one of the work tools there.
I believe the term is gopher.
Oh, there you go.
Did you find it?
Eventually got it. So, I got paid that day. So like it was great pride actually watching that. The car was run by Surtec actually at the 2002 and 2003 24 hour. So obviously just got to watch it from afar at the racetrack. But he had plans to run it in the Nations Cup Series in 2004. But obviously the demise of Pro Car at the time, that didn't actually eventuate for the 04 season. But I don't know where the car lives now. But I've got some great photos of me next to the 911 RS Porsche. So
Did he have any?
His factory was Sydney, wasn't it?
Sydney, yeah.
Bankstown way?
Not far. Where was the cricket, that big cricket shop down
Kingsgrove.
Yeah, Kingsgrove, yeah. So, yeah, it was just in one of the industrial sites there.
Did you have any Mondeos still sitting in there?
Yeah, we had one Mondeo that he was, it was just basically the shell. There was no motor in that. And, so that was going to be my next job, which we never actually got to. But, we're going to tear that out and repaint it. It was, still painted up. I think it was the 2002 Australian Super Touring Championship, number 12, run by Sam Dale at the time. So
that was the one that was blue base, but it had the weird colour scheme at the side.
Yeah, and that's what he was trying to get rid of. Yeah. Basically, the engine bay was like dark blue, and I remember Pete blowing up about that, saying only an idiot would have a dark blue engine bay. So he wanted something light to be able to obviously pick up any fluids leaking, oil leaking, in that sense. So he only discussed with me the big jobs, as you can attest.
So obviously in early 2004, the Pro Car ceased operations, and worked in with that was the Bathurst 24 Hour also basically went up in flames. There was a brief rescue package.
Did it go up in flames or go down like the Titanic?
Down like the Titanic. Game over like a Holden Monaro ad. But basically all done. There was a brief rescue package that they tried to put together, but ultimately it didn't come to anything, which was a shame because there were rumours that in 2004 there was a chance the Schnitzer BMWs were going to come over, the Nürburgring BMWs, but that came to nothing. And even as late as 2005, there's a quote from Peter Brock where he goes that the Bathurst 24 Hour should be restored to the calendar. He says, we can't let it go. It's such a fantastic event. So, which unfortunately that came to nothing either. We've never seen one since. But in 2007, we did get the Bathurst 12 Hour back, which in some ways is seen as the spiritual successor in a way to the 24 Hour. And I'll go to you, Daniel. Do you think there's anything that the 12 Hour can learn from what the 24 Hour gave us?
Yeah, I think it's plenty actually. As I agree with you, the 12 hours kind of just carried the torch. I think for a lot of Australia's sports car and GT racing fans. One thing I'd love to see for the 12 hour is bring back some night practice on the Friday night. I remember that was a part of the 02 and 03 Bathurst 24 hours, just on the Friday night, being able to actually just watch some practice qualifying, which is awesome and gives the drivers actually a chance to experience what it's like to drive at night, because at the moment in the 12 hour, the only experience the drivers get is racing on Sunday morning, which can be, it's great to look at, but it can be pretty intimidating. So I think running some night practice on the Friday night would be good for spectators and teams alike.
Do you think to make the night practice worthwhile at the 12 hour, they'd have to increase the night running of the race?
Oh, I wouldn't object to it. Oh, but even if they didn't, I think just something new, something different for the event
would be good to watch.
Yeah. So I'd like maybe start the race at 5, go 5 to 5, and that way you get an hour and a half, give or take.
I've actually liked the idea. Will Hagen actually mentions this during the 1991 Bathurst 12 hour telecast, and I've always liked the idea that they should run it 12 to 12. Started at midnight Saturday night and finish at midday Sunday.
That's kind of mirroring what they did with the Sepang 12 hour originally when they did it over there, that they ran it one day starting at midday to midnight, finished it up there, and then the next year they flipped it to run midnight to midday, but then later on they reverted it back to the midday start. So I was fortunate enough to be working at both of those for that, and it was definitely a cool experience starting at midnight, because when you're on the team there, you still roll into the track a little bit later in the day, but you still do all the prep and everything else from that. So you're pretty much doing everything you'll be doing in the day, but you're doing it a little bit later rolling in, and then you got to stay up for that whole 12-hour period. So it definitely could work and be, an epic thing, a lot more night running for it there. So
that was the magic of the 24-hour, was the
night.
The so much night running in the race. What about you, Brock? What can be applied to the 12-hour that the 24-hour taught us?
Lukey, I just want it to be a 24-hour event.
Yep.
If it's at all possible.
Yep.
I think it would add so much to the 12-hour. It's already amazing as it is. I think if it went a 24-hour, it would be far and away the best event in Australian motorsport for me.
Yeah. Well, the 12-hour itself in the last few years has moved away from what the 12-hour was 4 or 5 years ago. There's probably space that when the fifth Bathurst event went up for tender at the end of last year, Crevantic was one of the companies that put a bid in. There's probably room for a Crevantic style 24-hour race to run alongside the 12-hour.
Bold.
That is quite bold.
Yeah, I don't know if you can run a 12 and 24 hours for sports-based production cars,
but even if
in the Australian market,
if the 12-hour went GT3 Pro only.
Well, let's hope that never happens. But if it did go down that path, you could.
Yeah.
you could. But is there enough demand in Australia? Because think about it, you've got a 6-hour production car race. You've got now I take your point. You've got a TCR race. You've got a 12-hour race. Is there room to kind of bring all those categories together for one 24-hour race?
What if we turn the 6-hour into a 24-hour?
What if we just turn the 12-hour into a
Well,
24-hour?
Well, yeah.
If you would have asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said, don't mess with the 12-hour. Yeah, because we've got it to a point where we've got some continuity in teams and cars and things now. But the way they've tried to cut out classes in the last couple of years, obviously what's coming in with coronavirus and things like that now, maybe have a crack at a 24-hour. I think they're going to destroy the thing anyway. So
I can just give it a crack 1 year. Like maybe not 2021, but 2022. Throw it out there. Next year we're going for a 24-hour. Give it a shot. If the field isn't quite there for it there, they can always revert back to the 12-hour. I don't think it's ever going to hurt like the event itself. There'll be something there, especially with SRO involved for it. But it's worth a shot. It'll be cool again.
Well, the hard part is though, I think if you go 24 hours, I think the chance of coming back to a 12-hour is limited. Like say it doesn't go well, I think that might be curtains for the whole thing.
I just feel like the GT3 12-hour has enough of an identity and following now to justify splitting away from the traditional 12-hour and being its own standalone 24-hour, and then give the production boys with the 6-hour, give back their traditional 12-hour and sort of do it like that. Because I just feel like now the GT3 race has enough room, like enough weight behind it to stand between the 12-hour production race and the 1000 as its own thing, which I think 5 years ago it didn't.
Yeah.
To run a 24-hour race, though, I'm going to say that they need to guarantee more cars, but I suppose the O2 24-hour only had
I think
32 starters.
What I've heard is part of the reason they don't come is it's a bit of a crash fest. But if they said, look, we're going to make it, a pure GT3 race, I know for us on the hill, we don't want that. But if they could guarantee a 40, 50 car grid, it's going to be a 24-hour GT3 only separate. And then we also have the 12-hour, which has all the car classes and everything that we love. I'd be okay with that.
For an event, if you're able to get like 40 quality GT3 teams
just
in
like
there.
a Spa 24-hour, but it's Bathurst.
But if you've seen the Spa 24 hours recently, like that's a crash fest in itself, and that's 50 GT3 cars. Like I think it'll be last year was pretty good. It was a crash fest in qualifying, but take that aside. I think those cars, that track, you're not ever going to get rid of crashes around Bathurst. So.
But that's a bit of the special thing that Bathurst has going across the top is you only need to step, a wheel width outside the groove, especially in a 12 or 24-hour race. It's going to bite you. So it's kind of that endurance aspect where you've got to hit your marks, lap in, lap out, for it to do it. So regardless if it's a 6-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour. That's going to be there for it.
I think maybe even a 24-hour might actually help that too. Because the 12-hour at the moment, you're kind of caught between, is this an endurance race? Is it
12-hour sprint?
Yeah. So maybe going 24 hours then just steps that back a bit too.
Well, that's probably one thing on my memories of the 24-hour is that I think 03 you had on the last 10, 15 minutes, you had some of the class cars. I think it was one of the Future Tourers parking up on the side, waiting for the Monaros to go past with only a bit left, and then they rolled across the finish line. So they to save the car because they weren't going to make it. Like that's just an epic thing memory that pops into your mind for class racing at Bathurst. So
or at Le Mans when you got the P1 leader and there's like 800 cars queued up behind it.
Yeah.
Just cross the line. I just finish. We've had enough.
Well, I remember there was the O2 finish when, particularly, I remember the Mosler was crawling around. Martin Short had the door open. He was having a wave, and
Cams wouldn't have liked that.
No,
$10,000
I don't think they
fine.
did, but I think there were guys running around him, and because some of the class guys were just pressing on as usual. They weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't. But I mean, the history of the 24-hour proposals for Bathurst goes back to in 1985. There was a proposal to turn the Bathurst 1000 into a 24-hour in 1988.
As an endurance racing fan, I wouldn't complain, but I know I'm in the minority, so that's okay.
Yeah, well, it was only going to be for the 1 year to celebrate the bicentenary, but they
quite creative.
They nicked it in the end and just stuck with the formula.
Would you rather see the 12-hour how it is now? Everything's the same. They throw in a night practice, and then the event finishes on the event finishes, but then there's an additional 12 hours of racing. Would you rather that, or would you rather it stay how it is as a 12-hour currently?
Right now, I think as it's become more and more GT3 centric and they're doing all these things, I'm fully supportive to open it up to 24 hours. Have a crack at it. If it burns a thing down, it burns it down.
There was like 2 GT4 cars in the last one, or was there 3? 2 Beamers and a Merc.
There was
KCMs?
No, they didn't run this year.
No, there was just 2. There was the American, it was the
GT4 BMW,
the BMW and the Merc.
So if it's just going to be GT3, 24-hour, and then put all the GT4s in the 6-hour, that becomes the 12-hour.
Yeah, I can have a crack at it. Yeah. The only, I guess the hard part is, it's hard to say, if you're going to have a crack at it, don't do it next year, do it the year after.
Yeah.
Just gives us some time to actually get through the current crisis, and then we've actually got some stability. However, interestingly, SRO said during the week that as far as they're concerned, the 12 hours going ahead in February. So
I think you almost have to keep it as a 12-hour for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like next year's
they won't,
as Cardi B said.
They won't even. The budgets would be
set.
Yeah, way too far gone to try and bring that. But I don't think anyone had turned down an extra 12 hours of racing.
I wouldn't. And every year we go there, all I do is complain to Luke that there's only 7 hours left, Lukey. There's only 7 hours.
The only interesting thing would be, I guess, what teams think about it, especially the internationals. But really, if they're sending cars across the world, more bang for your buck.
Because I wonder how much more would the cost be to run a car. Well, actually, Adam, you might know because you're already there. Like you're already there at the event. What's all the 12 hours cost?
It's more so the componentry afterwards for it there. Like you got your general running costs for it there. So you got to burn through more fuel, more tyres for the event there. For it will just be your rebuild cost at the end. So where you might give something like a minor service after the event, you might just have to replace it for it there. So I think going off on an average cost, you're probably looking. I think the average mark for a GT3 car is about 20 to 25 euro per kilometre. So at the moment, that's about $50 Australian per kilometre per running. That's how they budgeted off there. So, I think some teams were running the 12-hour at, 300,000, say, some roundabout there. Obviously, some more factory teams are going to run a lot more than that, and some a lot less for it there. So it might be, for a fully fledged factory car, $500,000, maybe.
But we have to highlight the technicality of no factory teams in GT3. Although
factory
it's the same
supported.
drivers, same mechanics, same engineers.
With fingers set above our head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the 24 hours, well, Jim Richards, when he's asked it in the 2002 race why he wasn't running his Porsche, he jumped in with the PHR Scuderia Porsche, interestingly enough. But he said, so basically for him, he would have done a year's worth of running in a day. He's like, all the other option was obviously to race his Porsche for the season.
Yeah.
So he raced his Porsche for the season and jumped in someone else's car for the 24 hours. So obviously that was in 2002. But I guess that's the predicament for some of the owner drivers.
A lot of the things, with a lot of the local teams or whatever, or even the internationals, most 24-hour races, they have sometimes 2 sets of crew. So one part of the crew can have a rest for it there. I know there was a few local guys that did that in the 24-hour, that they'd send half the team away back to the house so they could have a sleep and switch it for that. So, we all said at Le Mans, all the mechanics catching sleep when they can in the pits for it there. You know, the customer sport teams, I'll use the right terminology for this one here. They would have their dedicated mechanics there, but for the local, the local semi-professional teams, if you want to call them that, they'll most definitely need some extra people there to do it. So, yeah.
Your mention of Jim Richards brings up probably the biggest what if in the 2-year history of the race. What if that PHR Scuderia GD3 RS didn't get crashed on the Friday of the 2002 event?
So who?
Because it qualified fourth.
He had Jim Richards. You had Fitzy, John Fitzgerald. Who else did you have in it?
Peter Fitzgerald.
Peter Fitzgerald.
We
John
didn't
Fitzgerald,
have a
the
tennis player in it.
Yep. Pete.
Did Mahir Gadri, was he one of the drivers?
I thought Mahir was in the Ferrari.
Could have been.
Yeah, I think he was in the Ferrari.
But I mean, that Porsche was qualified fourth.
Yeah.
And would have, you could have, would have, should have, could have done the distance, should have done the distance without too many problems. There's no reason that it wouldn't have, with all the problems that Monaro had.
Yeah, I think it would have been in the mix, but I can't have seen it. Winning. But yeah.
But some final thoughts. In the 2-year history of the race, what was your favourite car that competed in the event?
Favorite car, probably the Lamborghini Diablo. That was obviously we wanted it to be there in 2002. It wasn't a last minute deal. Got it there for 2003, and it was
quick.
It was very quick. Blew like 8 or 9 tires over 24 hours. But that was out of all of them. But geez, there were some good cars. Yeah.
What about you, Brock?
Oh, the Tandar. He was my childhood hero.
Apart from the Monaro.
Oh, apart from the Monaro. Were there any other cars in the race aside from the 437?
Not if you look at the results sheet.
Obviously the Lamborghini was cool. I can't remember what livery it was in. Was it the Crazy John's livery back then?
It was black and yellow.
Oh, the black and yellow livery.
But it had Donut King all over it.
Yeah. I'll go the Lamborghini. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. What about you, Adam?
For me, on par is that fluoro green Kawasaki Porsche, just from the 996 GT3 RS, cool car for it, and it just sounded amazing. And then on it, the Mosler, just still back then, cool car.
It was a boring colour scheme, not the Mosler. So my choice, it was a bit of a boring colour scheme. It was plain white, but it was the Altson Super Cup Porsche from 2003. It had the little lights, the little eyes.
LED.
Yeah, eyes on the front in the stint where it rained. It just looked, with the lights on, the 4 of them coming at you, it just looked fantastic.
Probably one car that we've overlooked a bit is the BMW Gdr that went out of the race in 03 quite early.
Yeah. Did it ever turn a wheel again?
Not that I've heard or seen.
I think it did some shakedown runs because the Searles picked it up after PHR didn't run in 2004, and they were going to run it at Sandown in the Pro Car round 2, I think it was at the time. But then with all the uncertainty around that, it got shelved.
Because I mean that car was a bit of a Monaro as well, wasn't it? In terms of rule design,
it was the US, wasn't it? It was brought across from the US. What they were running in what was it?
What category did that car run in?
It wasn't an ALMS.
It wasn't a GT.
No, it was. It was running in the LMS, wasn't it?
No, not that one. I don't think.
It was a similar spec though.
There was a V8. There was a
it
V8
came from the States.
There was a V8 in the V8 BMW in 2001 in the ALMS, but I don't think it was the same spec as the one PHR ran.
But there was a GT2 M3 GTR, wasn't there?
That was the one Schnitzer were going to run potentially
so this was a different spec, was it? I always assumed it was a similar thing. I think
it had a different size V8 in it.
Well, I mean, you could run a 7-litre at that event. Why not?
Yeah, you could almost do it. Could almost do anything. But yeah, that there was such a build up to that BMW coming in 2003 because PHR had teased for half a year that they had something big.
It was going to take down the Monaro.
Yeah, because mid Nations Cup 2003, they stopped running the Ferrari, and
that's right.
Bauer did a round in a Porsche and he did a round in a Viper.
That's it. He was trying to do everything to win the title, and
it's interesting the way he did it, but
Because did it do its engine or
The Ferrari.
no? The BMW that stopped. Or did it hit the wall as well?
Yeah, no,
Trying to
it had a crash, and I think something ultimately did break into it,
Yeah.
and then someone drove into the door of it
Because
in the middle of the night, and I think finished it off, but it was miles down by that stage.
Because it finished up top under the tree or something, didn't it, from memory? Because it threw yellows and everything from memory.
Yeah,
I think. But still
yeah.
cool car. So
not too sure. But on behalf of Adam, Brock, Daniel, I'm Luke Blattman, and we'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the Motor Racing Passion Podcast. Let us know your thoughts on the Bathurst 24 Hour and any of your favourite memories or things you saw on our Facebook page, Motor Racing Passion. This episode was produced by Luke Ryan for Tum Drum Media. Catch you next time on Motor Racing Passion.